So, first week I was in Afghanistan, I was in it was called the Kandahar PRT. The Canadians called it OP Archer Camp Nathan Smith. When I got there, it was the Northern Michigan National Guard. I think it was the 35th Infantry or something. It's whichever one has the little rainbow patch. That was them. They were doing Force Pro, and as I had been there a little less than a week, and they came over the intercom and they said that everybody who was not on guard duty had to get to the convoys. So I grabbed all my gear and I ran over there, and I was a computer specialist and I had deployed as a computer specialist, but after I had finished the first task they gave me, they really didn't have anything else for me to do. So I got moved around to a couple of different positions, and I ended up as a civil affairs NCO down in the Kandahar PRT. So all this was new to me. And they said, no, we are the QRF, the Quick Reactionary Force for Kandahar City, and a convoy just got hit. So I said, okay. I said, well, I'm just a civil affairs guy. And they said, well, if you're not on guard duty, you're in this convoy. So, jumped in the seat, and I remember I had to use the bathroom. And in this situation, whenever somebody calls in for the QRF, there's really no messing around. You have to get out there. Somebody got hit, and all of these attacks could possibly be part of a larger attack. Sometimes in Afghanistan, when you would get hit with a roadside bomb, that would be followed up with a small arms attack. It didn't really happen that often because the Taliban usually tries to avoid those force-on-force confrontations because they lose. But it happens. So we jumped in the convoy and we're going out there, and I remember I had to use the bathroom so bad, and I mentioned it in passing to one of the guys, and these guys had been there for 8-9 months at this time, and I had been in country less than a month, been in Kandahar less than a week, and so they of course they're laughing at me. You never tell soldiers about a problem you're having unless you want them to mess with you about it. So they're laughing the whole time that we're going there, which is, I'm sure it's a good mechanism for them to calm down as well, because, hey, this was my first, but it wasn't my last. And I'm going to tell you right now, so you get used to the routine, but you never get used to at least I didn't. So we pulled up, and then as we pulled up, the first truck, they pull to the far side, and everybody starts the perimeter, because by now a crowd has started to form. And in Afghanistan, the crowd, they hear an explosion and everybody wants to know what's going on. And then when the Americans show up, they still want to know what's going on. So they get closer and closer. This is also a tactic of the Taliban, is they'll wait for the crowd to form and then they'll explode another device. I've seen that too. So, our job is to keep, when you set up a perimeter guard, your job is to keep everybody back, keep everybody back from everything and let the medics do their thing. Let the leaders get in there and figure out the best way to handle stuff. And I won't get into the details of the convoy, but needless to say, it was an easy target. But I still had to use the bathroom. So in that situation, you pull up and there's all the screaming and the blood from the people who got hit. And they just got medevaced. So then when they get medevaced, you've still got all this stuff around. You got the bandages that, when you're doing emergency, life-saving combat medic stuff, there's going to be trash. There's trash. They rip things open and throw them on you. So, and the guy who was driving the car that blew up was everywhere. It's like pink, swollen meat, with charred black outlines to it. And I still, I had another one that was worse off, that more closely resembled barbecued meat. But this one was the first time I made that connection. So I have trouble now being at barbecues and looking at the meat that's on the grill, stuff like that, because it always reminds me of that stuff. And it doesn't, I've gotten to the point now where being reminded of it is not debilitating. And these are the things that I've come to a place where everything that has happened to me in my past, everything I've done, everything that's been done to me, everything that was done in front of me, everything that's it's all brought me to who I am today. And I'm the father of a great daughter. You know, I'm alive. I have all my limbs. So I need to really be happy about that. And everybody who is alive right now, who's maybe doubting themselves about what they should be doing, or, you know, anything about the decisions you've made in your past, just remember that everything that has happened in your past, good or bad, has brought you to where you are today. Okay. So if you're not where you want to be, use the lesson from that past. You know, that's what I had to do. And if you are where you want to be, like right now, I am exactly where I want to be, and I can't change that. It's a path that once you find that mission, that purpose, what's going to drive you, what's important, that nothing can ever take it away from you. And I think when we talk about PTSD, in soldiers, and we talk about, or in service members, and we talk about suicides, we tend to gloss over, it's a very important part of what's going on right now with soldiers and suicide. I call it a crisis of importance. That was what my problem was. And it's because all of the things that some of your combat vets have seen, and even a lot of the soldiers and service members who haven't seen combat, but who have had to sacrifice a lot, you know, it's a crisis of, what's it all for? What am I doing this for? What's the larger goal? What's the greater purpose? What good is going to come of this? What greater goal am I trying to reach? And I think that it's something it's very important if we're going to discuss suicide rates among the military, and we start trying to figure out exactly what it is that's going on with service members. Now, everybody has heard the 22 a day statistic. Okay, that 22 a day statistic it's from the VA, and it's from 2012, a study they did. Well, 2 years later, the VA released the largest suicide study that they've ever done in 2014, and the number is actually 20 a day. Okay, but that's not half of the story. Okay, because when we hear things like 20 veterans a day, of course our heart goes out to it and we're empathetic. But and even the numbers probably seems high to you, but that I don't really think that describes half of what the problem is. All right, so I'm going to throw a couple of more numbers at you and see if these grab you like they grab me. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. So in 2000, there's really, when you start talking about suicides, it's really important, especially when relating to veteran suicides, you need to break it up by 3 categories. Okay, you've got active duty military. Okay, you've got civilians, and then you've got veterans. And the difference between veterans and active duty military is veterans are anybody who has served. Okay, and active duty military are obviously on active duty. So you can look at the numbers. You know, what percent of these population does this, what percent of these population does that. But rate is how they break it up in the studies. Okay, the civilian rate comes from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. The veteran rate comes from the VA, they do studies, and the active duty rate comes from the DoD SER, which I'll let you Google because I don't remember. I know the DoD is Department of Defense, but I can't remember exactly what it stands for. So the civilian rate, if you look at it per 100,000, okay, per 100,000 people, you'll see the numbers behind me. The civilian rate for males per 100,000 people is 21.1. The civilian rate for females is 6, which is, you know, this is per 100,000 people. The active duty military rate per 100,000 people for males is 22. For the females, it's 11. Okay, and for veterans, per 100,000 people, for the females, it is 16.7, and for the males, it is 42. 42, compared to 22 for the active duty, compared to 20 for civilians. And if you group all of them together, male and female, you're looking at 13.4 for the civilians, you're looking at 20 for the military, and you're looking at 39 for the veterans. So, I think that active duty is a problem as well. The rates compared to the civilian they're higher, but they're not that much higher, so it might not get as much attention. But I can't reconcile that with what I've seen on active duty, especially these the newer generation of soldiers. And I honestly don't know why. I've heard a lot of theories as to why, but I'm gonna stay out of that one because I'm much more closer to the veteran side of the house now. So now, as soon as you start talking about this, what you hear from everybody wants to know why. Okay? And every time you hear a politician talk about it, or you hear them talk about it on the news or anything, they talk about we need to get involved, and we need more resources, and we have to study the problem. Okay, I can't speak, and it's another problem with PTSD in general, and probably depression in particular, that I can't speak to anyone else's situation. I can't speak to anyone else's symptoms. My PTSD is very specific to me, just in the way that it affects me and the way that I treat it. What works for me might not work for somebody else. And the symptoms I have might be the same that somebody else has, but they can deal with them better. So I'm going to tell you about, I can tell you about my specific beliefs on this. And I want you, as you hear me talking about it in generalities, just know I'm not trying to project on you. It's just, that's my experience, so this is how I'm going to be talking about it. So, why is this happening? Why is this happening? As everybody wants to know. Okay, so there's a lot of theories, and I've seen the ones out there about how, especially this newer generation, they just don't know how to deal with adversity, difficulties. How they're spoiled, and I've heard all these theories. I'll be honest with you, I don't know that I really buy them. Because I can wholeheartedly agree about how spoiled this generation might be, but there's usually more complicated things going on behind the scenes than, anything involving mental weakness, which is really what that is. If you just say that this new generation is, incapable. I don't really buy any of that stuff. So if you're still asking yourself why, I'll give you the answer, but I'm not going to give it to you straightforward. Okay, I'm gonna read some stuff. The American Revolution lasted 8 years, and 5% of the population fought in it. I googled how I figured this out. All you got to do is Google what was the U.S. population at this time, and then how many people were on active duty military at this time. Okay, you can find all these statistics out there, then you put it all together. So 5% of the population fought in the American Revolution, and it lasted 8 years. 5% of the population fought in World War I, and that lasted 2 years. Okay, World War II lasted 4 years, and 9% of the population fought on active duty. Remember that, that's a big war. So right after World War II, the Korean War lasted 3 years, and 4% of the population fought in it, because that was also a UN war. So 3 years long, 4% of the population. Vietnam lasted 9 years. And I took it from the Gulf of Tonkin incident, okay? I know because we were there before that, but because Vietnam wasn't a declared war like all the rest of these. And, we haven't. So anyway, 9 years and 2% of the population with the draft and everything. And the current war on terror has lasted 18 years. And the current percent of the population on active duty is 0.4%. So that's less than half of 1% of the population that has been fighting the longest war in our nation's history by far. I mean, the next closest war in length is Vietnam. And it actually, if you extend it all the way back to when we started advising, the war on terror is still longer. It's just not by much. I think it's like a year, maybe a half a year. So it's still the longest war in our history. And that's just counting from Afghanistan. Okay. From 2003 to 2009, your military was fighting on two fronts, okay? Afghanistan and Iraq. Still no rise in this percentage. It never goes above 0.5%, okay? I have been deployed 3 times. I have friends that have gone 9. There are people that have gone more than 9. There are people that have gone much more. Okay, especially when you start looking at our special forces community, those deployments are shorter because they're usually a little more stressful. So they do more of them with a shorter amount of time. My deployments were actually 12 months, 15 months, and 6 months. Now they only do 9 months with some exceptions. We're also not just fighting the war in Afghanistan anymore. We're not just fighting the war in Iraq anymore. We are in Syria. Okay, we're in the Ukraine. Marines are in Norway. We're in Japan. We're in South Korea. We're in Africa. We're across South America. The United States military is stretched across 800 bases outside of its borders of various sizes. Okay, 800 bases. 35% of the total active duty military is outside of our borders. Okay. This is the price that you're paying for this expansion. Okay? The bases and the op tempo and the demands, and whenever you talk about this problem with civilians, a lot of them, you know, and not just civilians, don't let me, with politicians especially, what we hear is that we need more resources. We need more doctors. We need more money for this, and we need better leadership over there, and we have to do a better job of taking care of the families. No, I'm sorry. This is my opinion, me personally, my personal opinion. You need to stop the wars. You need to stop. What are we paying for? Okay? Everything in life, and especially in politics, is a trade-off. Okay? You're willing to give me this for that. Okay? I accept the price that I will pay for what I'm going to get in return. Okay? And your military right now, you go back to World War II, you go back to World War I, the Revolution, Korea, Vietnam, even soldiers in Vietnam, a lot of them believed that they were fighting communism. Okay? And every American outside of your borders has a mission. They do. All of them. Nobody's just sitting around not doing anything. Okay? But what I need everyone to start asking yourself is this. What is that mission, and is it worth it? Is it worth it? Okay? And is there a better way for us to do what we're doing? Because if you ask me what the problem with our veteran suicide rate is, I'm going to tell you that you have been asking too much of too few for so long that they've broken. Okay? And they've been out there and they've seen the horrors of the world. And then you bring them back here. Okay? And with all these skills that they've learned and all these, the mentality that veterans have developed, which is we know what is important. You want to know what's important in the military? There's 2 things, your mission and your soldiers. And that's it. That's it. You accomplish the mission. You take care of your soldiers. That's your job. And you do this as you're executing some of the most complicated tasks in the world. Okay? And when you're in a combat zone and you're doing something that is related to a task that is to the betterment of the people that you're there for, like a civil affairs job that I had, or even a platoon sergeant job. Okay? It's easy to define what's important and what's worth the trade-offs that you're going to give for it. I'm going to be away from my family. I'm going to miss my anniversary. I'm going to miss my daughter's birth or my son's birth. My grandson's graduation, my father's death. All of these things, I'm willing to trade these things for the benefit that I'm giving the people in Afghanistan, or the defense against terrorism that I'm giving the people of Syria, and as a proxy, the citizens of the United States. We have to understand what we are buying with our veteran suicides. Because if we're not in agreement that it's worth it, let's stop paying for it. Okay? Because there's no scenario where we keep going down the exact same path we're on and things get better. There's no amount of counseling that's going to fix what's going on. Okay? Because the op-tempo is taking people away from their families. Okay? Their families and their children and all of the things that give them enjoyment when they're in garrison life or when they're on anything that they do in their free time, whether it's personal stuff, family stuff, education, whatever it is, all of that stuff is sacrificed for that service. Okay? And soldiers know that. That's what they signed up for. That's why you shake a soldier's hand. How I got out of this rut of none of this matters. None of this. When you come back home and you're looking around, I'll never forget. I was sitting in my mom's living room and she wanted to have a dinner to welcome me back from, I think this was Afghanistan. And she was trying to get the chairs right, to make sure that there were enough chairs to suit everybody, and she was stressing out about it. And I remember I kind of lost it a little bit. I said, well, who cares? They're just chairs. People could sit wherever. And I guess the way I had reacted, she looked at me and she said, it might not be important to you, but it's important to me. Okay? And that was one of the first times that I kind of realized that it's hard to reorient your mind toward caring about which one of my politicians tweeted what. You know, it's hard to care about who won on American Idol, or which celebrity said something that hurt what other celebrity's feelings. I mean, it's just hard to come back into this world and, you know, and just be like, is this what we're buying? Is this what we're paying for? So, I'm not demeaning any of those things, because what I was trying to illustrate is, just because it's not important to me doesn't mean it's not important. It just means it's not important to me, okay? Because the chairs were important to my mother, and she was right. She wanted to have a nice dinner for me, you know, and that is important for her. And just because the chairs are not a big deal for me, that doesn't mean they're not important, okay? And how I overcame that was I found something else that was important. I found another way to serve. And I found something that I found a mission. How about that? I found a mission that I can drive towards, and something that's worth it. You know? Something that can be worth all the effort you put into it. You know? And hey, pass or fail in whatever you're trying to do, it's the effort that matters. It's that you found something that is worth it. I'm not going to tell you what I found, because I'm not going to do that in this context. I think So if you have trouble finding something, all right, reach out, because there are people out there who need a good soldier who needs a mission. Okay? Something that you can use all of that drive, all that motivation, okay? And that 0 to 60, no, we gonna get it done mentality, and use it for a greater good. Okay? I call it what I called it inside of my head was a crisis of importance, because I had so much trouble finding something. So if you're a veteran and you need some help, I want you to reach out. Okay? If you're a civilian and you want to help, I want you to start executing by your actions. Okay? And when I say, use your vote, use your time, use your money, use whatever you can. Okay? But start asking yourself this question as a civilian. Is what we're buying for this price worth it?